Hey, I'm Catiewahwah, and you're watching The Record Review. This week on The Record Review, it's a bit of a throwback Thursday. I'm going to be taking a look at American Beauty by the Grateful Dead. Obviously a classic, and it's a record that I really believe is essential for any vinyl collection. Let's get the rating out of the way. It's 5 stars. I think we can all pretty much agree with that. And yes, you do need to own it. Here's why. American Beauty is widely believed to be, if not the Grateful Dead's best album, then most certainly their most iconic one. And no, it is not just Rolling Stone saying that. It was released in 1970 and was the 6th album from the Dead. The band were known for their psychedelic style and also their epic concerts, which would go on for hours and encourage this real jam band atmosphere. They toured for about 30 years and people still talk about their concerts, so it's gotta be something good going on there. American Beauty feels like a very self-contained statement about the Grateful Dead and their kind of musical perspective and style. The cover art is also really cool and quite iconic in its own right, I think, but it is an ambigram, which means that it can be read in more than one way, so you can either read it as American Beauty or as American Reality. So it's quite cool to have those two different ideas juxtaposed. So I have to admit that I first came into contact with American Beauty through the finale of one of my favorite TV shows, probably tied with Buffy for favorite teen TV show, Freaks and Geeks. An absolutely fantastic, iconic series as well. So in the finale of Freaks and Geeks, the main character, Lindsay Weir, is confronted with this decision that she has to make. She's been accepted to a very prestigious summer program at the University of Michigan.
How can I be in the top 1%? I don't study that much. I mean, are the kids in Michigan schools that stupid?
And she doesn't know whether she wants to go or not, because going will sort of put her on one life path and not going will put her on a very different path. So she's trying to decide whether to attend this prestigious summer program when her advisor, Mr. Rosso, the absolutely fantastic Mr. Rosso, hands her American Beauty.
When I was in college, back in the early 1700s, I'd put their album American Beauty on whenever I was stressing out. It always helped.
After befriending the school's deadheads, yes, there were dedicated fans before believers, Lindsay fools her parents into thinking that she's gone to attend the camp when she's actually sneaking off to go follow the Grateful Dead on tour. The whole episode is scored with songs from American Beauty, and they really work amazingly with the content and with the decisions that Lindsay's making. So the Dead had a lot of different musical influences, and American Beauty specifically has folk and bluegrass and blues, all these influences on it. But I think the best way to describe it without sounding like a complete music nerd is that it feels very hippie-ish and it's chilled out. So the cool thing about the album is that it manages to make you feel both calm and restless at the same time. It made me want to take a road trip, honestly. Like, it's very evocative of the open road, Route 66, Americana, or Middle America. In fact, one of the songs, Truckin, is all about trucking around America, and it has this sense of this almost meditative spirituality of being able to rhythmically go between different cities, and you just stop through and you're just stopping by. Just keep trucking. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Trucking was actually recognized as a national treasure by the US Library of Congress, which is pretty cool. But there's definitely this feeling, which I think was echoed by the way that the Deadheads would follow around the Grateful Dead, of finding some sort of peacefulness in traveling and being able to sort of live this slightly nomadic life and not feel like you're rooted to any one spot and not feel like you have to be rooted to any one spot. It's a cool album to listen to if you're feeling stuck or trapped. It's definitely driving music as well. It's quite hard to listen to it when you're just sitting down, but it is perfect to listen to when you're driving about. It also is definitely folk music in one of its truest forms, because I think that folk music, coming from folk meaning people, is essentially a type of music that represents the majority of people in an area, and I think that the Grateful Dead's American Beauty really does represent the vast majority of America. A lot of music scenes seem to be very city-centric, so you have the New York scene, you have the LA scene, you have the DC scene, the Seattle scene, it's always driven by a city. So to have music that is driven by the countryside itself and the space between those cities, where the majority of people do live, is really cool. I'm also going to argue now that American Beauty has quite a romantic view of that way of life and of that constant travelling. So please bear with me for a second. But basically that view of the 1970s, where everything is very open road and you can go anywhere, is idealised and is not quite as it was. And it's interesting to compare it to the English Romantic poets who were writing these very idealised descriptions of the English countryside in reaction to the impending Industrial Revolution. They saw something disappearing and they sought to sort of memorialize it and immortalize it. I would argue that the Grateful Dead are doing a very similar thing in American Beauty. If you think about when American Beauty was released in 1970, this is a period of urbanization but also suburbanization. So everyone was getting used to living very close to a city, very similar to that, and the countryside itself was fading away a bit. And I wonder whether the Grateful Dead saw that and sought to sort of capture that and memorialize that. I don't mean to say that they're making it sound particularly good to live in that period, but they are making it sound quite interesting. A lot of the songs are not necessarily happy, but they're quite dramatic, and they make it sound as though living in this sort of peripatetic life between various different cities and in that big space, that massive middle America between it, is very enjoyable. There's a lot of drama and things to keep you interested in it. The idea of having a music scene that is not really tied to any one city is really interesting, I think, and something that we don't really see anymore. So as I mentioned, you can't really listen to this album properly in a city, I think, or even in like a room. It really does inspire you to travel, and I think that that's something that we need right now. The whole album is like this invitation to just chill out and just sit down and be alright and think and maybe take some drugs. Not gonna judge, whatever they want to do. But it's just to take time to think for a moment, you know? And I think that that's definitely a driving reason behind why the album features so prominently in the finale of Freaks and Geeks, which is a series all about teen angst and not really knowing where you fit in and trying to figure out who you are. This idea of being able to take a break, listen to something, and just recalibrate. It's no coincidence that Lindsay is listening to this album while she's trying to choose what she's going to do for the summer and making a really big social decision. It's interesting that the writers of Freaks and Geeks decided that this was a point where Lindsay really needed the Dead to help her. And I guess on that, I would argue that right now, if you think about the political climate we live in, the economic climate we live in, I think we all need the Dead right now. I would advise everyone watching this right now to like go get a copy, listen to it on Spotify, listen to it wherever you can, and just take a full half hour to listen to the album. It's enjoyable, it'll calm you. It'll change the way that you're thinking about life. I used to listen to it as I was writing my senior thesis for university, and it helped, kind of. The last thing that I wanted to mention about American Beauty is that I believe that it has an absurdist philosophy behind it. And by absurdist, I mean the French philosopher Albert Camus, who had a really cool perspective on the world and life and how everything is so strange. Camus' views on the world can best be summed up by an example that he gave. He talked about the myth of Sisyphus. Now, Sisyphus was a Greek king who was a bit naughty, and when he went down to Hades after he died, he was sent to be punished. And his punishment was that he had to roll a boulder up a hill, and every time he reached the top of the hill, the boulder would go rolling down again. And so it was like this impossible task. And so the idea is like, oh no, every day we get up, we do something, we go to bed at the end of the day. Was anything really accomplished? Did we get anywhere? Dunno. But Camus said, what if Sisyphus is happy? Like, what if, as he's rolling that boulder up that hill, he's actually quite enjoying it? And he doesn't really care whether it stays at the top of the hill or if it rolls down again or whatever. Like, maybe he's thinking, how fast can I get it to the top of the hill? Maybe he's thinking, how slowly can I get it there? Maybe he's just thinking, I'm really getting some good, like, bicep work on this. But the idea is that if you enjoy the experience itself, then it doesn't really matter what the end goal is. Maybe there's a certain amount of happiness to be found just from the experience of living and not necessarily from any specific goal. In our current society, we are very success-driven, we are very achievement-driven, profit-driven. We always think about things as having these certain boxes that we have to tick. and that is sort of against Camus. And I would say that American Beauty makes the exact same point. The first song on the album, Box of Rain, is all about how the world is just a thing that we experience, and that we're not there forever, and it's not something that we can control, and it's a bit weird, but we've just got to enjoy it and just try and make of it what we can and whatever we want to make of it. One of the final lines of the song is, "Such a long, long time to be gone and a short time to be there." We don't know what the afterlife is, we don't know what's gonna happen then, we just know that we're here for a really short time. The theme continues in another song on the album, Ripple. "There is no road, no simple highway between the dawn and the dark of night." So there's no path that you can do that will mean that you've lived a good life. There's no guarantee that what you're doing is the right thing. I don't really know where I'm going with this, but I think that it's really interesting that it has this sort of folk music background, it has this idea of romanticizing a specific kind of America, and it has this absurdist perspective on life. But it's certainly something that's useful, I think, to us in the 21st century. Basically, I can just really understand why anyone would be a deadhead at any time. I think sometimes we shy away from calling musicians philosophers because we are scared of putting that much influence on them, and maybe they actively say that they're not. But I do believe that sometimes a band can be so influential in a certain mindset that it can transform the people who listen to it. And I do think that American Beauty, and also, you know, the whole back catalogue of the Grateful Dead, has done that to a lot of their listeners, and maybe we need to start listening to them again because they've got some quite good ideas. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel for more record reviews, and if you have any suggestions or requests of what you would like me to review, definitely post them in the comments down below. Next time I'll be reviewing Morning Phase by Beck, but until then, bye!